Hi, it's Steve, and I am here today with Jonathan Broadbent. Jonathan, thank you so much for joining us.
Happy to be here.
I'm very happy to. So, I've asked you to be interviewed for a gallery of freedom fighters, and I'd like to start the talk this way. Would you please share with us what does freedom mean to you, and why is it so important that you decided to take a stand to protect it?
It means, um, freedom means a myriad of different things to me, Steve. I grew up with this concept that America is this great nation, and it stood out from other types of government because we, the people, have a voice in what happens in our environment and around us. And over the last couple of years in particular, it seems to me we've kind of woken up to this notion that things aren't as they seem or as they should be. And I think that some of us, for probably a couple generations, if we fell asleep at the switch, and there's some bad actors that got involved and they have taken over control of some really important things in our lives and around us. And they affect not just us and our lives and our livelihood and children and future generations, but our health, our well-being, really everything. And I heard it said there's a lot that we could probably try and pack into a short interview, but um, I heard it said once that the most addictive thing that a human can experience is not cocaine or heroin. It's it is influence over other people's lives. And I think that that's true. And I think that there are people that fixate on controlling other people's lives. And you've seen it, there are parodies in movies, and you've seen things like, the Bond films we all grew up on, where there's the evil bad guy who's intent on ruling the world, or a little younger generation, it was Pinky and the Brain. You remember that? There was like, what are you going to do tomorrow? Try to take over the world. I think that there's some truth to that, that there are people out there that are intent upon controlling other people's lives. It sounds strange to hear, probably, and it sounds strange for me to say because I'm the opposite. I mean, I I Steve, I love the idea of everyone really just being left to their own as much as humanly possible. We want to interact in meaningful and peaceful ways, but the idea of some group of people trying to dictate what what sort of remedies I can get for and what I can have access to for illnesses and ailments, and how and when I can use my money, and whether or not I can see my parents or family when they're getting married, as we saw during COVID. I had a family member get married, and they finally gave up and did it via Zoom, um, and trying to dictate what cars we drive and all that stuff. I guess the short answer is, to me, none of that fits in my concept of freedom, and so I fight back.
And bravo that you do, and bravo that you're so aware of the imposition on so many fronts. Have you always felt like this, or did you become much more active in the last few years?
Well, I think that a starting point will help for context here. If you ever watched the Drew Carey show, there's a community that Drew Carey liked to make fun of. It was called Shaker Heights, Ohio. That's where I grew up. I was born and raised in that snobby community that Drew Carey hated. And I will tell you, I would be the first to admit what I tried to hide once my professional career started. I finally got to the point where I was like, oh, I'm not going to hide my past. I was ultra liberal. I had every color hair in the rainbow. I had dreadlocks for a while, a white guy with dreads. It was hard to do. I got to tell you, dreads for white guys is not easy. I had 7 earrings in one ear, the skateboarder type. I grew up on rap, hip hop, metal, punk, all those kinds of things. And I absorbed all the stuff that I was given by a very liberal, far left education system. But it wasn't until later in life when I started realizing I stumbled upon some of the lies and BS that I'd been given in that environment, including college. It wasn't until my 20s and 30s I started to discover just vast repositories of great information that had been hidden from me as a kid, about our history, about our culture, about everything, about men and women and families, Black America in particular. I grew up in an environment where there were several times where I was the white guy. I grew up in a school within a school because I was a problem child. I think nowadays I would probably be billed as like ADHD or something. But I was constantly in trouble, and I was put in a inner school where I was the white guy. And to me, throughout, there's a steady theme of race relations it's interwoven in everything that I do and everything that I'm about, because I because I experienced that. I also worked in an area called East Cleveland, which is a predominantly Black community, as a professional, and got to experience just the dynamic of sorry, we're into the weeds a little bit, Steve, but the it's one of those things that really bothers me, and it's a hot button for me. The constant portrayal of Black America in news media and TV roles and movies and all that stuff. It's almost universally monolithic. Like, this is a Black person, and it's just so rabidly untrue. Anything you can think of when you think we're both Caucasian, and you think about white people, it's like, the rocket scientists and the doctors and the nerds and there's so little portrayal of it, and it's so seldom touched upon in media discussions. But those things hold true, of course, in Black America as well. And so that's a constant theme. So talking about things like religion, gender, both genders, both male and female, um, and Black, white, all of those kinds of things. It's an environment, I guess. I consider myself fortunate. I have no qualms about discussing any topic, because I think none of them should be off limits. And anybody that tells me I can't comment on fill in the blank topic because I'm white, or that I'm mansplaining if I bring something up, I just dismiss that as pure nonsense. One connected to that, one of the things that you and I have talked about, and you can tell me if I'm going too far into this. It's entirely up to you. You can steer me in the conversation as you like. But one of the things you and I have talked about in our conversations in the lead up to this is, like, what does the fight mean to try to keep our freedoms and liberties for future generations in the US? And I don't believe, actually, let me think about how I want to frame this. I don't believe that there is that there are compartments of conversation, that that if you're Christian, you can't comment on atheist or Jewish viewpoints, or Muslim, or that if you're man, you can't talk about women's issues, or that if you're Caucasian, you can't talk about Black America. And that's all of that stuff is just complete nonsense. It's meant to drive us into these little corners and these little pockets where we're not experiencing each other. And I think it's done for a reason. It's designed to keep everybody insulated and feeling insular, like, okay, I'm in my little club now, in my little group. And then you add that the element of social media, where we get these echo chambers, and it's like, oh yeah, my little social media group where I just type like mad all day is like Christian, white, male, heterosexual, you get and then it's just this dumb echo chamber. It's horrible. And that's where, and it just continues to drive people into their separate little camps, and they feel like they're right. And um so putting all that together, I came from this place in my mind where I was like, I saw myself as some kind of like activist freedom fighter. I was the white guy fighting for the black cause. And then I got caught up in a lot of like feminist types of stuff. I was reading things like Margaret Atwood. I read all her stuff, and I bought into that, and I believed that. Like, oh, I don't see the patriarchy, but I'm sure it's out there somewhere. And I don't really see the racism, but I'm sure it's out there somewhere. And you go through enough waves of that, and you age and mature to the point where you're like, wait a minute, I'm told that this horrible stuff is all over the world, and that it's pervasive in America, that I know. Actually have my CRM open. I've got I used to travel for work a lot, yeah, all over the country, north to south, east to west. I lived out of hotels, rental cars, and airplanes for years. And I have a little over 14,000 contacts from San Diego to Milford, Connecticut, all over Florida. And I I couldn't find it. It was like, where is all the racism? And where are the men who are like, women need to stay barefoot and pregnant in the kitchen and stuff? That's just, it's like, it's rhetoric, and it became part of how people thought the world really was. But there aren't enough people challenging that and saying, that makes for good storylines in a movie, but where is that really? Where are the where are the banks turning down black lenders and black business? Where are the men who are abusing women and forcing them out of careers and into the kitchen? Um, where are the where is the anti-Semitism? Where is the anti-Christian? We find that in little pockets, and our society, in America in particular, has gotten really good at finding it, pointing it out, and getting the light on it, and eliminate, or not eliminating. I don't know that we'll ever eliminate any of those things, but there's less of it than now than I think any time in history. You go back to the 1800s, I mean, gosh, um, anti-Semitism was rampant. We had anti-Asian, um, anti Irish. Everyone, still don't understand that. They hated the Irish. I think the Irish are awesome. I dig them. Um, but to get yourself to the point, and for me it was eye-opening, and it just changed my soul and my feeling about the world and life around me, to get to the point where all of that fear and all of that feeling like we were all in these little compartments and everything, it's just washed away. And you start to look for people as who they really are, and realize there are black people I want nothing to do with. There are Christians I want nothing to do with. There are Jews who I want nothing to do with. But overwhelmingly, when you stop using that label first and just start looking at the person, then your life changes, because you start looking for who that person truly is. They're not that thing. They're not that skin pigment or gender or whatever. They're a person. They have a soul. They have a life. And um, getting into the thing that was the catalyst for me, and I've mentioned this, you and I talked about this. I'm a regular, ordinary, I'm actually this really nerdy behind the scenes guy. And for most of my life, I was like, if you handed me a microphone and put me in front of a group of people, I'd melt into the floor. I was like, I couldn't talk in front of a group of people. But about 3 years ago now, there was a thing that happened in our local public schools. Or actually, I've taken now to calling them government schools. I don't think they're public schools anymore because they don't listen to the public. I stepped in and decided to push back because they were doing some really bad stuff. They were doing terrible things in the school district, and I knew a bunch of people in the community. I called a bunch of friends. We all went in to this community. It's a very diverse, eclectic community. Um, and we all went in and challenged the school board. We're like, what are you doing with this? This is terrible. It was this program called The Color of Trauma, and it was every bit as bad as the titling sounds. They were mandating it for certain kids and certain classes, and in this thing they said, if you miss it, if you don't do this thing, then you're going to be docked a bunch of credits and stuff. It had everything to do with your color of skin and creating activists in the community and at home and all this stuff. And in our community, we got together that we were Black men and women, white, Asian, Middle Eastern, um, Jewish, Christian. So we just happened into this perfect mix to stand up as clearly, visibly, we were the thing that they were saying, that was the immediate counter to this whole divide and conquer narrative thing. So we challenged the school board, and they ended up repealing. They altered the program significantly. They pulled it back from a 3-hour program to one. One of the two very controversial women that they had planned to come in and speak, who was this kind of race warrior activist from Atlanta, Georgia. They nixed her. And that success, first, I've got to tell you, in case any of your listeners are not aware, school board meetings are tremendously boring. Nobody wants to go to YouTube and watch a school board meeting. But that darn school board meeting that we had, where we pushed back against those people, it hit 185,000 views.
Wow.
Like, school board meetings you're lucky if you get like 6 views. We had 185,000, and people came in from, it was around the same time as like Loudoun County, Virginia and stuff. And so news crews came in from all over the country. Nightline came in and mic'd up my wife and me and followed us around for part of a day, and all this stuff. And that just seeing that firsthand with my own eyes, seeing the power of we the people, our voice, as we were a community. It wasn't some person just going in saying, you guys are doing some weird stuff, we don't like it. It was a community saying, whoa, throw on the brakes there, school board. we don't like what you're doing. You need to explain to us. And it had profound impact. One more thing connected to that, and I can't help but throw this out for your listeners. I hope that I can talk and instill some excitement about where we are and some hope for where we can be again as a nation. So I mentioned that all of this stuff started, and I don't I think I'm just this normal person. I'm just a community guy, trying to make, the best family that I can. Be a good husband, be a good dad, and all those things. And I run this company. Actually, now it's several. But um, when sorry, completely lost my train of thought. I was heading somewhere with that. You're going to interject a question. It's going to keep me rolling.
I got 500 questions, but we only don't have that much time. I get
Oh,
it. You're marvelous. What keeps you up at night?
oh man. Oh, all right. So the thing that keeps me up at night are all these issues: First Amendment, Second Amendment, K through 12, um, our our ability to make money and not be interfered with by our government. The comment from Ronald Reagan, the six scariest words you can hear are, from the government and I'm here to help. But I remember what I was going to say. All of that stuff and getting into the fight and stepping into the fray, getting into the battle, it was unexpected. It's not something I would have thought of myself for, because I don't think of myself as that type of person. But once I was the guy that stepped into that school board and raised my hand and said, wait, hold on, you're going to need to explain this to me because I don't think I like it. All kinds of amazing stuff happened. So um, there are battles. It's not easy, but I have made such incredible friends and contacts all over the country. It's unbelievable. Once I stepped in and was like, all right, fine, I'm in. I'm gonna fight. I don't know where it's gonna lead me. And I feel like my rear end is hanging out and I'm exposed. And I got plenty of hate and stuff on social media. There are people that want to try and blame everything under the sun, and probably the sun and climate change. Or I don't know what they want to blame everything on me. But there are so many just unbelievable, amazing turn of events and people that I've met. And one story, I shared this with you last time we spoke, Steve. This once I was offered a position as a chair and territory lead of a group called Protect Ohio Children. We're the people that go out and help communities to organize to push back against the woke left stuff in schools. And right around when I first started, 2.5, 3 years ago, I started in this role. And there's a spot not far from me that's like super freedom. They're this bar restaurant that just never did masking. They never did anything through all of COVID. And somehow they were just like, they thumbed their nose at all the Fauci decrees and all that stuff. And they stayed open. And they had this afternoon of speaker series. And they invited in all these great speakers, like come in and talk about this issue, that issue. And I got added to the speakers list. I'm now friends with the woman who organized it, but back then she didn't know me. Maybe she'd seen me somewhere or seen something I'd posted or something. But she said, come in and speak in our group. I'm going to give you 15 minutes. And like pretty much every time, I have no idea what I'm going to say. I just go up and I feel like I'm like this empty vessel. I'm like, God, please please tell me the right things to say to have some beneficial, positive influence on the world, because I don't know. I don't really know what I'm doing. I just, please use me. And it worked, I guess. I have no recollection of what I said that day. I got up and I was basically said there's some bad stuff going on in schools, and these are issues. And whatever it is I said, seemingly separate from that, there are all over my state of Ohio, there are a whole bunch of great people over the last few years who've been elected to school boards. And one in particular is this woman. She's like the epitome. She's the example that everyone says she's Zen like, and she's always just so peaceful, but she's passionate and she cares about kids and education, and she pushes back against the woke left. Everyone loves her. She's adored, except the left. They want to get rid of her. And I found out after about a year or so of her being on this school board, I met her in person, and she told me, she said, I went to this restaurant a year and a half ago, and I heard you speak, and you're the reason that I ran for school board. I was like,
Wow.
to this day, I'm like, what in the, how is that possible? How am I the one that had some kind of cool impact on this amazing woman and the cool stuff that she's doing? I mean, like, I'm in awe of her. And then to hear her say that she got started, she jumped into the school board race because of whatever it is I said. I was like, that's stinking awesome.
It's really awesome. So who impacts you? Who are your models? Who are your inspirations? Who gives you strength?
So I draw from a number of different strengths. Well, first of all, on social media, there are a good number of people who are very supportive. I do get my share of hate. I'm this terrible person, whatever, blah, blah, blah. I just tune it out. But what I think people don't see is behind the scenes, there are so many people that send me direct personal messages, and they're like, thank heavens. I love the fact that you're doing all this stuff and saying these things and stuff, because fill in the blank. My husband works at the hospital, and I think he might get fired if I say this, or my kids go to this school, and if I say something out loud, then my kids might suffer. And there's always a reason, and I don't dismiss or doubt any of them, but the fact that there are so many people who just say thanks for doing what you're doing is tremendous to me. But specifically on unwoke investing, I started that because I sort of inadvertently ventured briefly into the ESG world before I really knew what it was, and I figured out pretty quickly that it's terrible and treacherous, and I work opposed to it. And the people who run the ESG thing, they know it, and I'm open with them. I told them I run unwoke, and I'm the antithesis. I'm the counter to what you're doing. Um, but that organizing people, and I talk to people all over banking, insurance, finance, all day, every day, and I've got a great group of people that have rallied together. And I think often of Dr. Simone Gold and America's Frontline Doctors, Dr. Robert Malone, people like that, who in the thick of like all the COVID stuff and trying to get everybody to mask and then double mask and jab and do all of the extra jabs and everything. It was tough for those people to organize and get out front and say, nope, hold on, I disagree. I don't like what you're doing. I don't think that it's fair to the end user, the people. And I see a counter to that. I see an alternative. And I view, in the world of finance, I view that as my role. I model after Simone Gold and Dr. Robert Malone. There are plenty of us. We don't pick up any major media, with the exception of Vivek Ramaswamy, excuse me, I mispronounced his last name. He runs Strive Financial. I think he's doing great things, and he's raising a voice for for the non-woke investing world. I talked earlier today to a group. I actually have a conference call later this week that's focused on investing in opportunity zones. Remember those
I
from
do.
Trump?
I
Yeah.
do.
So they're building, this stuff is building. It's so exciting to be on the cusp of this. And I'm like, you know what? I just thumbed my nose at the whole, I left Wall Street years ago. I turned whistleblower on ESG, and now to have the ability to partner up with and work closely with people who fly in the face of that and believe more in our essential freedoms and liberties than in the almighty dollar. It's an honorable place to be.
Very much the case. So that brings us to our last point, which is I think we've acknowledged that the fight for freedom is kind of eternal, at least in America today. It's going to be a multi-generational war. Having said that, thinking ahead to children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, and generations far into the future, what do you want them to know about you? What do you want your legacy to be?
I tried my very best. Some days it's exhausting. Um, sorry about the dogs. So it's there are, what's the expression? Um, for me personally, I gravitate toward that expression. Um, I'd rather die on my feet than live on my knees.
Yeah,
I'm not going to kowtow to anybody, but that just all of those things that have kind of impacted me through the years, like freedom isn't free, and tyranny is only, what was it? Tyranny is only one generation away. Um, those those things. Um, I oh, and another piece that I hold dearly is the I don't know that I'm going to remember it exactly off the top of my head. I think I have it somewhere saved on one of my screens, that at the end of the what was it, the Constitution, it said I pledge my my life, my help me with this. What is the expression? I'm just suddenly drawing a blank. I've said it probably
I can't
10,000
draw it to
times, and
mind
uh,
quickly.
yeah, so there's I pledge my life, my sacred fortune, and my honor. It's something like that. It's basically, I I am willing to sacrifice anything, whatever it takes, in order to try and assure that one more generation, that next generation, gets to experience the freedom and liberty, the some manner, some level of the promise of America.
Wow. Well, Jonathan, you have treated us to a heck of a lot of insight, and you were nice enough and trusting enough to share with us your transformation and your waking up. And I think that was very gracious of you, because I think that there are many people like that that are listening to us and that are kind of primed to be awake and not woke. And you're a role model for these folks. You're the guy that says, hey, I got a brain. I started to use it. And you know what? Things aren't the way as they appear to be. So not only do I give you a lot of credit, but I give you a lot of thanks, because this is going to encourage other people to open their eyes and ears. And I can't think of a higher impact service than that. So thank you so much for sharing that, and thank you so much for giving that to us. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, well, my pleasure. And I do hope that people find it helpful in any way, shape, or form. Steve, thank you for what you're doing, putting these messages out there. I did check out your website. It's super awesome. I kudos to what you're doing. I applaud the effort, and anything that gets um community, that builds community, is one last parting thought that I can't help but share. But I say this a lot when I'm invited to speak publicly. Unfortunately for us who are in this fight and fighting back from somewhere other than the left, the far left, the far left control the media, the social media, what passes for the news outlets. So we're unfortunately not privy to our own successes. They reason that there's such control of the messaging and media is because the last thing that the bad guys want is for us to have hope and feel encouraged. But when we get, you folks like you and I, when we get together and talk, we give each other courage and we share successes.
Yes, we do. We strengthen one another, and that's why
Yep.
we will keep talking. Thank you,
I hope we
Jonathan.
do.
All righty.